Thank you. I request the audience to please be seated. Just give us a minute to change the dais for the next plenary session, panel discussion on disruptive technologies.
So, good afternoon. While the stage is being set, we are getting into the final session. This is a very important panel discussions, in a sense, a summation of all the deliberations that we have been having over the past 3 days. I'm here to introduce the members of the panel who don't need any introduction. We are actually having this panel on policy framework for disruptive technology, which is being anchored and moderated by our patron, Dr. Pawan Goenka. He is a distinguished alumnus of IIT Kanpur with a PhD from Cornell University, years of experience in General Motors R&D in the US, and joined Mahindra in 1993 and has developed several successful products where he is now currently the managing director and also a member of the group executive board. He has received several awards. One of the key ones are Fellow of SAE International and Fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineers. On the business side, is the last recipient of the 2016 FICITA Medal of Honor for his distinguished achievement and leadership in the global automotive industry. And he's the first Indian to receive this prestigious recognition. He has held several positions, past president of SIAM and ARI Governing Council, board member of National Skills Development, and National Council member of CII, and also Chairman's Manufacturing Council. He's currently the chairman of the board of directors of governors of IIT Madras. So Dr. Pawan Goenka, request you to. And we have the next distinguished member of the panel is Professor Ashok Jhunjhunwala, again, who doesn't need any introduction. He's a professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering in IIT Madras. And he's also a distinguished alumnus from IIT Kanpur and his MS and PhD from Maine. And he has been a leading researcher, fostering industry-academia interaction. And his brainchild is the IITM Research Park, the first of its kind in India, which essentially promotes industry-academia interaction with more than 100 R&D companies. He has essentially made significant contributions in the telecom industry. And then he has moved to solar DC innovation, where he is, again, contributing significantly in terms of the energy security. He has received several awards and chairman and member of various governments. He was also director and board of several public sector undertakings like State Bank of India, BEL, HTL, NRDC, BSNL, and BSNL. Currently, he is a board member of Tata Communications and Mahindra Revan, Tejas Networks, and other several companies which he has nurtured to grow. And he is a Padma Shri, which was conferred in 2002 Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award. He is also a fellow of IEEE. Welcome to Professor Jhunjhunwala. The next distinguished panelist is Mr. Eric Schaefer, who is a senior managing director and a global lead for products and industrial and Industry X.0 in Accenture. He is leading the Digital Industry X.0 program with the objective of supporting industrial companies in harnessing digital opportunities. Eric also leads one of Accenture's global business services, Accenture Product Lifecycle Services, which provides end-to-end services. His primary industry background is in automotive and industrial equipment manufacturers. His secondary industry focuses on freight and logistics and transportation and travel. His project track record covers business transformation programs encompassing complex businesses and technology changes, and he has led such programs for large multinational companies. Welcome, Mr. Schaefer. And the next distinguished panelist is Professor Dr. Frank Zhao. He is a professor and director at the Tsinghua Automotive Strategy Research Institute in Tsinghua University, China, and is a leading strategic researcher in automotive industry policy and corporate management technology roadmaps. Dr. Zhao has more than 30 years of studying and working experience in several countries. It's Japan, UK, US, and China. Before joining Tsinghua University, he was vice president of Zhejiang Geely Holding Group and vice president of Shenyang Brilliance Jianbai Automobile Company and research executive of technical affairs at Daimler Chrysler. He is currently the president-elect 2018 to 2020 of FICITA and member of Global Future Council on Mobility of World Economic Forum. He is also a fellow of SAE International, fellow of China SAE, chairman of Technical Management Committee of China SAE, and is also the founding co-editor-in-chief for the English Journal of Automotive Innovation, executive chair, co-chairman of China Automotive Elite Think Tank, and Vice Chairman of China Auto Talent Society. He's also Chief Advisor and Board of Directors to several major companies, and like all the other panels, very highly awarded and decorated. And he has developed a high-end auto executive talk show program named Fuquan Zhao Research Institute. So he has written more than 300 academic papers in English, Japanese, and Chinese, delivered more than 200 keynote speeches at major conferences and forums, and he has received more than 30 significant recognitions and not limited to 2016 Person of the Year by China Automotive News. Welcome, Professor Zhao. It's also my privilege to introduce the next distinguished panelist, Mr. Rajan Vadera, who was anchoring the previous event. He's the president of automotive sector of Mahindra & Mahindra. He's also the president of the Society of Indian Automotive Manufacturers, SIAM, and a former president of Automotive Research Association of India. He's essentially also a member of the group executive board of Mahindra & Mahindra. It's a BTech and Masters from IIT Bombay, and the graduate of the Advanced Management Program from Wharton Business School. He has over 37 years of R&D experience in technology and sourcing, and also led several successful program development at Mahindra, and also the responsible for setting up the North American Technical Center of Mahindra & Mahindra. So he's the chairman of the board at Mahindra Graphic Research Design, Mahindra Heavy Industries Limited, and MNAT's is Mahindra North American Technical Center. He is also director of holding company of Pininfarina and Mahindra North America and Mahindra Electric Mobility. Welcome, Rajan.
Thank you, Arvind. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the last session before we have the closing ceremony. We are very tight on time because I'm told that Honorable Governor will be here at 3:50, and we must finish by 3:50, and this is chair for him. We have had a very interesting 3 days. And the theme of the Congress was around disruptive technologies. And you'll agree that we have had a lot of discussion on things that lie ahead for us, things that people are working on, things that people are hoping for, and the things that we need in our societies. We have had many distinguished panelists, speakers who have talked about disruptive technologies. It's generally believed, and it came out in the last panel also, that new technology often needs some support before it can stand on its own feet. This support could come from corporations investing for the long term. This could come sometimes from PEs putting in money for a longer term return. This could come from customers willing to pay more for new technologies to earn the right for first use. But more often than not, these technologies are supported by government action. This action could be in form of carrot, in form of stick. Sometimes it could be banning something, sometimes it is mandating something. But we have many, many examples around the world where new technologies have been supported or facilitated by government policies. Policy clearly is an important enabler for disruptive technologies. World over, we have many examples of this. In India, closer to home for many of us, we have seen many safety regulations, emission regulations, energy conservation regulations. For example, CNG coming into Delhi, for example, going from BS4 to BS6. For example, the safety norms coming into India have all been supported or facilitated or forced, some may want to say, by policies. So as we have heard over these 3 days, the mobility paradigm is shifting to a mix of personal ownership and shared mobility. Further factors such as commuter convenience, efficiency, and clean air considerations are driving integration of multimodal mobility. Autonomous, connected, electric are driving technological innovations in R&D facilities of OEMs, suppliers, and academic institutions. Many startups around the globe are working shoulder to shoulder with established R&D houses, in fact, some cases giving a run for the money to these R&D houses. We have put together a very distinguished panel that will debate over how policy framework will help to usher in these disruptive technologies that we have deliberated over in the last 3 days, both in the global perspective and also in Indian context. What are the opportunities and what are the specific challenges? I'm going to request each of our panelists to speak for 4 to 5 minutes on how they see policy ushering in these technologies, or even technologies that we need if we have not talked about it. And after that, we'll have short interactions through questions and answer. Since time is absolutely limited, I do request panelists to keep it to 4 to 5 minutes. I start with Professor Zhao.
Hello. Well, good afternoon. It's always a great pleasure to be here and to talk. Actually, we talk about the future mobility. We really have to understand, what will be the future mobility. I will be saying something about China. First of all, China has been the world's largest auto market during the last 9 years. Actually, the market is slowing down quite a bit, so we are really walking our way from the 2 digits sort of annual increase. But this year, it's slowing down quite a bit. We may even see a negative figure. Regardless, and then we are reaching the level of 30 million annual sales, only made in China, sold in China. And we really don't have any major export yet. Given 30 million, the size of the market, we are only exporting about 1 million units, to overseas. And then what will be the future size of the Chinese auto market? And then, there's a lot of different predictions. So we are expecting about 30 million now to 40 million units and from 30 million now to 40 million units annual sales, in China around 2030. That will be another 10 million increase, sort of margin 10 years down the road. That's pretty much made in China, sold in China. If we are looking at a rapid growth for export, then maybe, made in China 50 million, then sold in China 40 million. That's sort of the rough estimation, all the analysts, both the auto or even the economists are really trying to predict in the auto market. Well, then we are seeing a lot of problems, traffic congestions, pollutions, and also even the energy security issues. So we need a new solution for the future of China auto industry. Then people are believing electrification, connectivity, and also intelligence. In addition to these 3 technology-related areas, we're really looking for a new business model. For example, changing the ownership and so on. And then with the auto industry moving towards the future, everybody agreed in China, and which we have similar situation as compared to other parts of the world, will be the new era of auto industry. We need a new transformation. So there will be different powertrain, EV and fuel cell, and also, connectivity will play a major role to make the auto industry as a mobility rather than just kind of the service provider. And then looking at the future transformation, Chinese government pretty much believe, even the whole auto industry in China, we believe, so auto industry will become borderless. It's no longer the industry we are used to, and it's no longer the industry OEM and the supplier are working together to entertain each other. So it's becoming a new industry, and many players need to be involved. And also a lot of the business area, which we can do ourselves with the traditional, OEM and the suppliers. We need basic connectivity and intelligence. We need a new player. That will be, our traditional information technology company and data company and so on. And then another important element, in addition to the technology provider, that will be the government. Their role in the future, because they should provide the infrastructure we need. They should provide sort of a lot of the legal platform for us to really move into the future of the industry. And then that's why I even propose called new business model 1+1+1. One is a conventional industry we're dealing with, then the second one will be the information related technology, and the third one will be the role of the government. That's why Chinese government now put a tremendous effort, into the new mobility business. So, for example, the traditional Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, and then now even the Ministry of Transportation, they are really getting into tremendous. They wanted to offer even the transportation, service infrastructure and so on. So we call 4S. We need a smart vehicle, but we need a smart vehicle in the smart transportation. Then we need a smart energy system. All together, then we can build a smart city. This is a really very popular word in China. I use a lot called 4S. And then we realize, if we miss any part of the whole thing, then the transformation wouldn't be successful, especially dealing with China, 40 million annual sales within the next 10 years, and also the energy issues, traffic congestions. In Beijing, and anyone who have been to Beijing, probably you can only do 2 business during a day, gonna kill you. Sometimes just one trip will cost you an hour and a half and even 2 hours. That's really a problematic issues. And also China seeing the ownership is walking away. So all this, we need a great support from the central government and also from the industry, which we are not familiar with, is the information data company and also even the new energy company. That's why we see a lot of new players, which none of you are familiar with, like a NEO. They are really the newcomer. They come from the connectivity, information technology business. They're building cars, with a big dream. So we realize collaboration is the key for the future. Disruptive technology, it doesn't have to be new, but something eye-opening, make our industry better. Otherwise, we wouldn't go anywhere from what we are today. That will be what I have to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhao. May I now request Professor Jhunjhunwala for his views.
Thank you. I heard in the previous session 2 things. First, that 14 out of the 20 most polluted cities in the world is in India. Second, that 80% of our oil is imported. And then there was a talk about EV, and was pointed out that EV is not a solution. Because though there is no tailpipe emission, there is still some carbon dioxide emission taking place while making power. I disagree with that. The reason is, today, the cost of generating power using solar and wind in India is lower than that for coal. So, and therefore, solar and wind are accelerating at a very rapid pace. In fact, at any point of time, the amount of solar and wind put in any year is going to be at least 5 times what is going to be consumed by the car. So I think this is just taking us in different direction. We need to go to electric. We need to go to electric. That is the fastest way we'll solve our problem. Any trying to slow down is going to hurt. What is the problem? Problem is that EVs are just about getting ready, still need subsidy. All over the world, government continues to subsidize. Fortunately or unfortunately, in India, the subsidies are going to be limited. However much we fight, however much we plead, finally, only crumbs are going to be thrown at us. So the industry has to stand on its own legs. And therefore, it has to do something different from what the rest of the world is. And one of the important things that we must recognize that 79% of our total vehicles are two-wheeler, 5% are three-wheelers. And even out of the cars, 85% of the cars cost less than $14,000. If I take today's rupee value, it is $13,000. People in the world do not make this inexpensive car, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. How do we really make them viable? Because the market is that. Market is large, provided we can do it at the right price point. So what do we need to do? In India, there has been work going on, and actually it is not just work. The vehicles are starting to get rolled out. One, we have paid attention to energy efficiency of the vehicles. We make more energy efficient vehicles than many other parts of the world. As a result, our battery requirement goes down, and battery size goes down, and battery cost goes down. For example, about a year and a half back, our autos used to consume 80 watt-hour per kilometer. Today, it is consuming around 52 watt-hour per kilometer. This is something that if you pay attention to, you can do. Better motors, better tires, lightweighting can help us. Second way of reducing cost is by using smaller battery. All over the world, the focus is use larger battery so that it can go for longer range. What we are saying, well, we will use small battery and we will swap battery if required. Why should you always have to say we need large battery because we need to go several hundred kilometers? We can go smaller distance and swap battery that is required. It has to be perfected, and that is another thing that we are going to really make a mark and can make a difference. Third, while we can do the rest of the things, battery materials, nickel, manganese, lithium, cobalt, graphite, where are we going to get it? India does not have it. The only way we can get ahead there is if we recycle battery. We take old batteries and recycle. Today, India, from its cell phone and laptop, has 100,000 tons of battery, that is lithium-ion battery, that is thrown out. If you use that 100,000 tons, you can do 23 gigawatt hour of battery cells each year. And this is the beginning. Things are going to go up. So we have the ability and we have the technology to do battery recycling. So combination of, this is the disruption that we have to do. We have to do things differently from what the rest of the world does. More efficient vehicles, use smaller battery, if necessary do swapping, recycle batteries to get materials, and I think India, in a relatively 10 to 12 years, can convert its fleet into a complete electric fleet, powered by solar and wind, and not having the problem of pollution, not having the problem of oil import. This will change India. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok. Eric, you probably have a very wide global perspective on how policies affect technology or technology affect policies. Could you give your perspective to us, please?
Yes, thank you. What I'll do is maybe start with a few words on disruption, as we're seeing in automotive and across all industries, and then I'll build on what the other two panelists said. And for me, collaboration is key, so I'd like to spend a few minutes on this one. So disruption, maybe just to set the scene, a piece of research we did with the World Economic Forum, and which we shared at Davos, I think it was 17. So we interviewed 2,500 executives across the world and from very diverse industries, automotive being one, but also consumer goods, life sciences, utilities. And two data points, which I think are very relevant for this session. 93% of the executives we interviewed said that digital technologies, artificial intelligence, data, quantum computing, would completely transform their industry within the next 5 years. So it's tomorrow. But only 17% said that they had a strategy to address these challenges. So wherever you are, sit back, you're not the only one. We're at the beginning of this disruption. Building on that, another piece of research for the World Economic Forum showed that not all industries are seeing the disruption in the same way at the same time. It seems obvious. But more than 75% of the industries are either at risk or already seeing significant disruption. And automotive, especially the automotive OEMs and suppliers, are right in the middle of this disruption with CASE, connectivity, autonomous, sharing, and electrical. But there's still more disruption to come. So business as usual is not an option, and I think we're all conscious of that. Another important factor is the product. And I've heard many people and many panelists talk about the move from products to services to outcome, the move from an experience economy to an outcome economy. But digital is overtaking the product. And here too, on my day-to-day work with many of my clients, what I've seen, and they've had that feeling, is that the value of the product, of the car, of the vehicle, is shifting from mechanical to electronics, that's way past, to software, to digital. And digital will represent 70%, don't quote me on the number, 70 to 80% of the value, the perceived value from the customer. So although we're focusing on highly engineered products, and cars are highly engineered, the value from the consumers or from the enterprise that buy these fleet is around the outcome, the experience, the efficiency that these platforms are delivering. So a massive disruption. I've got an engineering background, so I focused on a highly engineered product. That's what I'm passionate about. But this is not what the consumers are passionate about. So we need to keep that in mind. The implications on the players and the role of government. I'm a great believer in that the industry needs to take its destiny in its own hand, and industry players need to collaborate. If you take the German OEMs, the consortium they've built around inboard services, working together on a pretty strategic feature, creating the experience, but they're working together. industry forums like this one, I think is a great forum, but also MOBI or, the Industrial Consortium, for example, cross-industry are great forums to share, influence, define policies, standards, and influence the way government will support. Great believer in that. Ecosystem, which was also a word that was mentioned. I think this is one of the key drivers of the change, but also one of the key levers, opening up to the outside, building and nurturing your own ecosystem, working with competition, sometimes working with your suppliers, working with academia, working with startups, working with enterprises from other industries. But the ecosystem allows you to get that innovation from the outside, flowing into your organization, but also access, when required, capabilities that none of us can build. I think one thing that we have all learned is that not one company can own the whole value chain and have internally all the capabilities. You need to be flexible, agile, and access what you need when you need it. The third, I think, element is what I would call academia, startups, and industry working together. And I'm a great believer of working with universities to let that innovation flow in, working with startups to get, they're agile, they come up with ideas, why do something that these guys can do? But it's the team of three that really makes the difference. And this leads me to, well, what's the role of government and of policymakers? Two roles. One is to facilitate, and I think somebody used the word enforce, all of the above. So helping academia, startups, different industries to get together, to work together. And here I find, as mentioned by what the Chinese government has done in enforcing that 50% of the vehicles sold by 2020 would either be partly or totally autonomous, policy forcing players, but also looking at infrastructure. And here, what the Dutch government is doing, for example, spending $100 million to transform traffic lights and enable them to communicate with autonomous vehicles. So forcing, facilitating, and then building the right infrastructure, I think, are the two roles of government.
You have a very unique perspective, being president of SIAM and therefore having to deal with the government policy making, being CEO of an auto company, and also having technical background. So perhaps you can combine all three and give your perspective to us.
Sure, Pawan. During the lunch, Pawan, just to state, somebody was mentioning the large representation from Mahindra. So my disclosure, Pawan, as he already said, I'm here as president of SIAM, being there in the earlier panel as representing Mahindra. So definitely, Pawan, there is, I think, a very, very big need in order to make sure that, I think it's given that there will be mandates, and these mandates, as my very dear panelist shared, would be coming either from the government or in extreme cases, it could even come from public outcry. So if the nudges are going to be there for sure, both from the regulatory bodies as well as the government, I think it becomes important for industry forums like SIAM, industry bodies, to be mindful of such pressures. Can we ask them to stop, maybe? And all these forums need to work very closely with the government bodies. Once the mandate is given, I think it becomes important that there will be a policy framework coming around that. I think one of the biggest example, as you quoted very well, of the German OEMs, where they work very closely with various government bodies, and they make sure that what is good for the country and what is good for the bodies is co-created, and hence there is a win-win situation. I think the way the automotive industry in India is now coming together in the last particularly 10 years, when there is an onslaught of a lot of regulations coming around emissions, crash, safety, congestion, and there is a much lower level of tolerance because given the fact that health is getting affected, given the fact that energy is increasing, etc. So I think it is unavoidable that industry will have to take a lot of proactive steps. And that's why, Pawan, I remember a few years back when you were president of SIAM, you started building the nation responsibly. I think and that all the SIAM members have truly adopted themselves to that need. And we are trying to create early interventions with the government in terms of understanding. We have also constituted a group where we are taking consulting help from outside, which is going to talk of next 10 years, what could be the various norms on crash, safety, emission vehicles that are likely to come elsewhere in the world, already existing, and how shall we mandate that along with the policy makers for ourselves, so that a sort of a trust building measure where we try to co-create is the need of the hour. And of course, in developed countries like particularly Korea, UK, Germany, there is a whole lot of facilities available, technology parks available where technology can be developed together, but competitiveness of individual organization can still be done at their setup, but basic technology development can be done. So therefore, if one way to move forward is to set up such technology parks in the country, where at the moment we don't have. So government may have to incentivize technology parks. Industry forums would require to work with industry, academia, startups, and government together. I guess there is a realization and a recognition around that effort. So once all this happens, I think my understanding is the incentivizing will become easier, and also the regulatory framework that will get developed subsequently would be easier because everything gets co-created. So I think that is the mood of the industry body today. You can call it realization, you can call it introspection, or you can call it as the only way forward with this disruptive technologies that are happening.
Thank you, Rajan. Let me, we have about 20-25 minutes. So, Professor Zhao, China is often given as an example where policies have really led the development of the country. And we, in fact, often cite China's example to our policymakers on how policy needs to work together with the industry and with the development. China has taken a very aggressive path for electric vehicles, and in fact is by far way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of use of electric vehicles, and also taken a path different from what rest of the world has taken in terms of type of electric vehicles used. Is it all policy driven, or is it coming from OEMs or coming from customer demand? What led to this absolutely fantastic development of EVs?
Well, it's a very good question. You know, I think to the outsiders, I mean, you know, when you really look at what's going on in China, and for example, the promoting the electrification.
Just one second. Are you also getting an echo there? Everyone's getting an echo? No? Okay, it's only here.
Well, only here. We echo quite a bit, but that's fine. And like electrification, during the last 10 years, the government put a lot of subsidies to promote, you know, the development of EVs. And then to the level they can't really afford doing so anymore. But if you really, I spent nearly 20 years outside China. I went back to China 16 years ago. I gone through the whole process, looking at the electrification. I have to say, at the beginning, some of the individuals in the government, you know, national level, they are very much interested in promoting EV. But clearly, you know, they try harder to promote it and didn't really get the reaction from the industry. And then even a lot of experts try to criticize, you know, the government. That may not be the right thing to do. But, you know, then some up and downs, and then they work together, then they come to what we are today. Even though now we are really looking almost, you know, 1 million unit sales this year for the EVs. But for a 30 million market, it's not a big number, but still. And looking at the global wise, that's a big number. But my understanding is the government put tremendous effort. But it's the process, you know, government working together with the industry or the OEM. They even don't, agree with each other in a lot of argument. Then they come to what we are today. But I think look at the transformation of the industry. My feeling is probably when we are really moving towards the next generation of auto industry, the government role may be more important than ever. Why? Because so far during the last 100 years, we are always seeing the evolutionary change. Then I think industry ourselves, we can do the good job. From powder fuel injection to gas and drain injection, from three-way catalytic converter, we go to lean NOx. But if you really look at the change of the electrification, the infrastructure is very important. If you really go to the connectivity, then the facilitating the infrastructure for data exchange, connectivity. When we do V2X, what's that next? That X is only one part of the vehicle. All the other like infrastructure, facilities, hospitals, transportations, without the support of government, it is very, very limited. So I think government may be playing a more important role than we ever think when we move to the new industry. But looking at China, even you look at government has a lot of power, but they are arguing. They don't agree with the industry a lot. So industry trying hard to convince that not right thing to do. Even now we are adopting the dual credit requirement for NEVs. Still, a lot of the OEM don't like it because they don't feel they are ready for 10%, or 7% for 2020, then 15% for the fleet sales, for the new vehicle around 2025. But government said we have to do it. And then we are forced to be prepared, and then meanwhile, we are negotiating with them. That's why the dual credit requirement was initially started 2018 this year, then was postponed to next year. It could be even delayed. So I think it's a mutual action. That will be my reaction to your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Zhao. Ashok, you and perhaps I are the two biggest proponents of EVs in India, but there are many here that I see now. There are many converts. You have done a lot of cutting-edge research, not just in EV, but other fields also. And you also just said that we shouldn't expect to get too many SOPs from the government for electric vehicles. But still, is there a role for policy in making electric vehicles happen? Or do you think the market forces by themselves will sort of bring in EVs in India? And also, if I could add to it that in some of the other work that you have done, which doesn't relate to auto industry, has policies helped your work to come in the forefront and become usable?
To your second question first. I remember way back in 90s when most of us had to wait for 6, 7, 8 years to get a telephone at our homes. 7, 8 years. Nobody will understand that today. But India used to do that. And we had pushed for wireless as the way to overcome the dilemma. There was a lot of opposition from the government for quite some time. Lot of difficulties put. In fact, it was very interesting. Right in the beginning, they were very happy that something new is being done in India. When we got something done, the opposition started. And then it took 3 to 4 years when the opposition melted away, and we today have 1 billion phones. I think by and large, I've seen this happening. If India takes an initiative, if it is an initiative that comes from outside the country and being pushed here, probably the policy falls more easily together. It's sorry to say that, but I am a professor, have been here for a long time, and I have to state that. And if it is done largely from India, like what Mahindra did or like what we did, there is going to be opposition. But we are building the foundation of actually setting this up. My own feeling is the opposition will melt away at one point of time. The policy certainly could facilitate. In the beginning, policy could just stay away. If you look at the IT revolution in the country, and India is known for IT, what did government do in the beginning? It only created obstacles. You can't import this. You have to pay this much taxes, this much duties. Once it crossed that barrier, then of course government has adopted IT. I think to some extent same thing will happen with EV. The market forces are ready. Fortunately, Indian industries are ready. We just need to move ahead and get our hands wet or whatever, dirty or whatever you want to call. Move on. And the government will come along. And at some point in time, they will become facilitator. But I've spent 2 years in the government. I've been close to the top powers. I was principal advisor to Piyush Goyal, and most of you know how powerful he is. And he was a great supporter of mine. And yet, we see all the difficulties. So I believe some difficulties will be there till industries start marching ahead. The minute industries start marching ahead, the opposition will stop.
Let me try and pin you down a little bit more. I know it's hard to pin you down, but I will try. Is there one policy, non-fiscal, is there one policy that is needed today to make electric vehicles happen, non-fiscal?
One policy that will make electric vehicles happen faster. I think that one policy, fortunately, we have won. Basically, India, as I pointed out, India has to do things differently. Charging and swapping has to go hand in hand. I think a year back, there was a huge opposition. They said, has anyone else in the world has done swapping? Well, there is a Taiwanese company which has done extremely well with swapping, but that was ignored. And that was not acceptable. Today, it is accepted. The second is, I think we really need to get our act straight on the charging standards. If we are able to get that right, I think we will get things moving. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening so easily. I write a blog called Understanding the EV Elephant. It comes from an old story called Seven Blind Men and the Elephant, where 7 blind men went and touched, somebody touched the ear, somebody touched the tusk, somebody touched the tail, and then they started describing the elephant. I'm sure that story is known all over. And it was a funny the way when they described, none of them really understood the elephant. I think electric vehicles are pretty much the same. All of them have seen the electric vehicle somewhere or other. Nobody really understands electric vehicle, particularly in Indian context. And they all then try to drive policies, each driving it in a different direction. That's the unfortunate thing. In fact, if you are interested, go through this blog, Understanding the EV Elephant, and you will see a series of articles, what will make India win.
Thank you very much, Ashok. Eric, let me come from a different perspective. See, auto industry is often perceived to be very defensive, conservative in taking on new technologies and new regulations. And policymakers are often seen to be too aggressive and trying to push things that are non-doable. For example, the new CO2 limits that are being talked about in Europe. Is there a truth on both sides? Is there a happy medium? Should the industry be more aggressive? Should the policymakers be more accommodative? What do you think the happy medium is?
Okay, that's a very good question. I'm not sure there's a happy medium, and I think the industry is more aggressive than the policymakers. Because I think the industry has realized that if you take a prospective look by 2030, a piece of research that has come out showed that the profit pool of the automotive industry, so take all the profits of the OEMs and the suppliers, the profit pool will double over the next 10 to 15 years. Double. So continue to sell more cars, maybe not as fast as before, but we'll sell more cars. But when you look at the share that the OEMs and the suppliers will capture, if today it is 70%, by 2030, it will only be 35%. Which means, and at the same time, the OEMs will have to double, if not triple, their R&D budgets for case. So there is, I think, an industry which is in a corner, and many of the OEMs and the suppliers have realized this. So they know that they need to do something. So they are aggressive because it's a survival, I think, of the industry. And with many of the OEMs with whom I personally work with, they are very aggressive when it comes to artificial intelligence, to connectivity, to analytics, to edge computing in the vehicle and in the cloud. Much more aggressive than the policymakers. I think the policymakers are usually lag a bit and follow what the industry is making. Maybe one point on electrical, which we've talked about a lot. it is a challenge for many of the industry players, but I also believe it will level the playing field. And differentiation will not come as before. The powertrain was really an element of differentiation. I think with electrical, that will not be the case anymore. And so the experience, and I come back to digital, and the experience, the user experience will be key. And this is what will truly make the differentiation between a brand, a model versus another one. So experience is, for me, the challenge of the industry.
Thank you, Eric. Let me take this forward, Rajan. See, when the BS6 norms were announced by Government of India and they forced the industry to go from BS4 to BS6, everyone in the industry went and said, cannot be done, nobody's done it before, don't do it, you are being unrealistic, and so on and so forth, but the government stuck to their ground. And today, everybody is saying we can do it, it will happen 31st March 2020, we'll be ready. And we lose our credibility in the process. How do you build more of a trust between the rule makers, policy makers, and the industry? So that a more collaborative approach which pushes technology faster, not slower, can happen between the industry and the government. And I think this is one of the big problems that everybody in the world is grappling with. It's not just an Indian problem. Everybody else, same thing, perhaps a larger extent in India than other places. But how do we resolve that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think BS6 jump that we had from BS4 to be done in 3 years and skip BS5. First of all, I think there is a very thin line between bravery and foolishness. The result is not out yet. So by March 2020, yes, everybody is struggling to deliver, but let's see what is the percentage of success.
Are you saying they're just putting a brave face?
Maybe some. Second risk is the calibration and validation of this technology is very, very difficult, including the DPF and the SCRs, which are going to come in BS6. There's a lot of thermal management that is required for the Indian driving cycles in our mega cities where the speed is very slow. So there are going to be huge challenge. While we can monkey geometry from Europe in terms of putting a DPF, putting an SCR, putting all the controls hardware, I think we cannot monkey performance for India conditions because India conditions are completely different. We have had a tough time to convince the government. We were not able to convince, so we put up a brave face of, okay, fine, if you mandate, we will try. And I wish everybody comes out successful, but I have gone on board and admitted it that in my 35 years of career, I have never seen a tougher time to deliver a technology that gets mandated than the current time. Everybody is full. AVL is full, Bosch is full, TVS is full, the Delphis are full. Everybody, you talk to them privately, to people, everybody is struggling to deliver this. So coming back to your question, how do we avoid such a kind of a situation? I think as I earlier mentioned, the problem is in India, there are more global OEMs than the Indian OEMs. Global OEMs have developed some of those technologies elsewhere. So there is a lot of pressure that comes on the government. Those technologies are available, Indian OEMs can also adopt. But Indian OEMs, if they adopt those technologies, you will see once you get into BS6, vehicles will become more expensive by almost 20%. And then see what happens to the affordability, the industry, the volumes, the employment, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, the problem is more with the Indian OEMs who have to develop ab initio those technologies and hence the cost, the time frame required. I think there's no point in beating about it. The best thing is to get into a huddle, get proactively together, build trust. And SIAM has taken that step where next 10-year roadmap of likely regulations, likely enforcement that is coming in, map it up front, work on it proactively, and sit down and deliver.
Thank you, Rajan. Just on a side note, perhaps half of you who are in this room are directly involved with getting ready for BS6, either as OEM or Tier 1 or consultant or supplier of technology. I just want to express my gratitude to all of you because I know how hard everyone is working to make this impossible task possible. And I'm sure that we will come through and we will have BS6 in all our vehicles come 31st March 2020. And I hope it remains 31st March 2020 and not sooner. So we have probably 5 minutes maximum. So I would like to get 2 questions from the audience back there. Keep your question very short, please, so that we can get 2 or 3 questions. After that, first over there.
My point is, I compliment to the point Mr. Eric has mentioned, the kind of investment going to increase on the R&D side. So, do you think the government policy side should be more to assuring whatever the R&D investment we are making, so the disruptions, the disruptive technologies, whatever the investments we are going to make, the OEMs, the industry sector, are assured of certain timeline for getting it payback and the affordability to the mass, so that it will be receptive to the mass. So rather than declaring a technology, should there be a equal importance from the government side in policy making that, okay, if you invest on so and so technology, the timeline for that is assured? I mean.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question. Great question. I think there's maybe 2 aspects to the answer I would provide. Is the first one, and I think most of the panelists mentioned it, is the collaboration, the ecosystem. And so if you take an OEM, it will be extremely costly to develop his own technology, his own solution. And it is how you team up either with others in your industries, your suppliers, sometimes your competitors with the German case, but it is about spreading the investment or pooling in the money to develop or to respond to a new norm, a new policy, a new standard, or develop a new feature. You can't do it on your own, I think. And we've seen this in many industries. Automotive is no different than other industries where they have highly engineered products. How do you team up with others? And then maybe, secondly, the role of government, the universities, and I love the country ambition, which you mentioned, is that how an industry players pool, work together, huddle together with government, with the universities, to develop a solution for the industries and for the country. So I think those would be the 2.
Quick question, please. Short.
All right, it's going to be very quick. My name is Mohammed Kamaluddin, and I'm actually with Faraday Future from Los Angeles. My question is to Professor Ashok. First, I'm really happy to see everybody here. It was a great presentation and speech by everybody. So, Dr. Ashok, so when are we going to see charging stations in India, from your view, like not every other streets, but a person can charge his car or electric car day to day? And what are the spots you think we should put those charging stations? Thank you.
Yeah, as soon as we start talking about electric vehicles, we start talking about charging stations. It's an important question, but I like to ask, charging stations for what? Is it for two-wheelers? Two-wheelers, which is 79% of India's vehicles. If you are talking about 79% of our India's vehicles, the charging will be mostly done at home. And makes sense. Otherwise, here and there, some AC sockets in the daytime, sometime they can charge. You really don't need elaborate charging stations. Talk about three-wheelers, which is 5 to 5.5%. They are going to use battery swapping. They are not going to use charging publicly. Occasionally they may, but we can again use AC charging and some little. Are we talking about the four-wheelers? Not talk about buses, four-wheelers. Four-wheelers, 85% of our vehicles are below rupees 10 lakhs or $14,000, or as I said today, 13,000. Only 2 to 14% of vehicles, which is 2% of total cars, 2% of total vehicles are above $13,000. If we are talking about low-end vehicles, which are today Tata and Mahindra makes it, there are few that I saw, Bosch here has a vehicle very similar, there are few others who have similar kind of vehicles which they can make. They don't need very high voltage charging. Mostly they work on 72 volt and 48 volt. There is a standard already exists in India, defined by Department of Heavy Industry, costs very little, it is made completely in India, defined in India, made completely in India, and costs very little. I think the vehicle manufacturers can help set that up, because it makes business sense. It costs only less than $2,000. At that point, it makes business sense. So there exists, and it can actually come up. Unfortunately, the feeling is about the top 2% of the vehicle, which is 15% of India's four-wheelers. Of course, they will require something like CCS2, and I strongly recommend that we should probably standardize on CCS2, and as and when those vehicles come, this CCS2 chargers can also be put. Only unfortunate part is, today the CCS2 chargers do not make business sense. We have to work to make business sense out of that.
Thank you, Ashok. Last question here, please. Give a microphone.
Sorry, I'll come back. Okay, it's Mike Ma from the Executive Editor-in-Chief of Automotive Innovation and also VP of Visita Technical. And I have a question to my Indian friends. So our two nations share lots of common, such as we have both our country have more than 1 billion people, and we have a growing market. And also, we have lots of young people for the potential buyer. So my question is, how we can collaborate together for the education level and for the technical level? How we can work efficiently together as well.
Question is, how do you do the electric vehicle? Repeat the question, please.
Oh, yeah, my question is, our two nations share lots of common, such as history and growing market, and how we can work together, both for educational level and technical level.
Okay,
Thank you.
unfortunately, we are out of time. I've been told that we have to wrap up this session as Honorable Governor will be here in a minute. So we will try and give you a question answer offline. Arvind, if you could conclude, I just want to thank the panel for very interesting insights on how policies and technology come together and good questions asked and answers given. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Give them a big round of applause. I'd request Dr. Pawan Goenka to hand over the mementos to the distinguished panelists. First, to Professor Jhunjhunwala. To Professor Zhao. To Mr. Eric Schaefer. And to Mr. Rajan Vadera. And request Dr. Bala Bharadwaj, President of SE India, to hand over the memento to Dr. Pawan Goenka. Thank you.